Hi, everyone. It's Katie Crysdale here from Lakeview Aquatic Consultants. Welcome back to the channel, and thanks so much for joining me this week. Each week, we spend some time talking about the aquatic industry, what's been happening in terms of news and events. The vehicle for this is primarily our weekly newsletter. And this week, I did have a bit of a surprise because we were not planning to do a newsletter because it's Canada Day and Independence Day in the United States. So I was going to take the week off. But as last week progressed, there was just more and more and more things happening that I didn't feel like I could skip. So that's why we're here today. We're going to have a quick look at our weekly newsletter. That is going to be linked in the description box down below. Please do subscribe to the newsletter to get it in your inbox every week on Wednesday. This audio version comes out a few days later. The main reason I do the audio version is because so many of you have shared that you don't have space in your inbox for yet another newsletter. You're already super busy and you're not at your desk that much as a pool person. The other thing about the newsletter when I talk about it on YouTube Live like this is I'm able to provide a lot more detail and context and nuance, and in some cases, personal opinion than I am in the newsletter. So I do want to start off by saying a big thank you to everyone who watched last week's audio broadcast regarding the newsletter. Last week was a very difficult conversation. So I'm speaking about the June 23rd, 2026 newsletter when I talked a lot more about Camp Mystic. I talked about Emily Kaiser. I talked about Cultus Lake. I talked about the Kitsilano pool. That newsletter was fairly balanced in terms of updates. But I really didn't have the opportunity in that newsletter to dig into the Camp Mystic report the way I wanted to. It was a 115-page document issued by the state of Texas the week before. And so essentially what I'm talking about right now is that the audio recording of last week's newsletter, I was able to dig into that report, and the video ended up being 2 hours and 20 minutes long. So that is a very big ask to get people to listen to that length of content, even when you're driving on your commute, even when you're like, I love to listen to podcasts or videos on YouTube when I'm batch cooking or when I'm doing simple cleaning around the house or folding laundry. 2 hours and 20 minutes is a really big ask, and I'm so gratified that so many of you have been able to take a stab at listening, because I really did not set any time parameters on myself to discuss the report. I wanted to be respectful of the 27 little girls, young women who drowned at Camp Mystic in that incident in July of 2025. Historically, when I make these YouTube lives, I do turn into a bit of a motor mouth and I follow my passion and my enthusiasm. And I'm talking a mile a minute because I'm also trying to fit as much valuable content in as possible, because the standard thinking is who's going to listen to a 15, 20, 30, 45-minute video or podcast, however you want to think about these discussions. And so most weeks, I really try and move at a steady clip. And I know that disadvantages people who prefer more long form content or who prefer more detail, more thought out process. I try and kind of bridge between my preference, which is always long form content, and what the average person needs in their day to day busy, overworked lives. However, when it came to the Camp Mystic report, I felt that in order to do the lives justice, to be respectful of the topic, and to properly encapsulate a 115-page report, I was committed to taking the time it took to do that newsletter report, to do that commentary. The 115-page report is considerably shortened when you skip over or you see the formatting for the memorials in the document. So each individual has a single page in memoriam in the document, which I think is amazing and hugely important to the families, that their names are mentioned, their faces are shown, their stories are shown. prior to their death. They're not only memorialized by this horrible tragedy, but that cuts out 30 pages from the report. And then further, there is a lot of citations and quite a few maps and graphics. And so I would anticipate that the bulk of the document is around 60 pages. But it is, I would say, 1.5 time spacing, and the paragraphs are indented and separated. So it's not like an 80,000 word document. It is a substantive document, but I would say, maybe it's 10 or 20,000 words. Still, I spent some time. I recorded it this past Saturday. I read the report clean straight through. It took me about an hour and 10 minutes, including processing in my mind what I was reading. And then I was able to do the YouTube live for last week's newsletter in one take. And I was really, really happy with how it turned out. The topic is obviously a tragedy and a huge trigger for lots of people. One of my best friends from summer camp, who I worked with and attended camp for many, many years, I had shared the recording with her because we've been talking about Camp Mystic throughout the year. And she said, I honestly, I can't listen. I want to support your work. I generally watch your content. I want to give you views. I want to like and support the channel. I support your business. But I just can't listen to this. This is too much of a trigger for all of the amazing memories that we both have at our camp in Canada, but also kind of that self-reflection as an adult now with the benefit of hindsight. Were we adequately prepared in all ways? Flooding was never going to be an issue for us at our location in Canada. We were not adjacent to a river, but yeah, it's a very traumatic incident. And I just want to say a big thank you to those of you who've watched the video, listened to the video, supported the video, shared the video. And I also understand anyone for whom you just cannot consume the content anymore because it's just too upsetting. The main update in this week's newsletter, the June 30th newsletter that was published yesterday, is that Camp Mystic has now filed for bankruptcy. This is not surprising to me at all. This is a legal strategy, a financial strategy to, block access to funds and resources and potentially disclosure of certain things without additional legal requirements or legal procedures. So I'm not surprised, but I could understand how people who have not followed the degree to which the family and the organization who own Camp Mystic have done everything in their power not to be accountable or state any level of accountability or apologize for this incident. So I will keep following this story out of personal and professional interest. You guys know I have a wide range of interests, and I'm just personally and professionally curious. But this Camp Mystic story, I think, is really a watershed moment for aquatics in terms of just how many things went wrong, how many opportunities there were for prevention, for action, for administrative control that would have mitigated this incident up to the point of the actual deaths. One of the other takeaways I just wanted to share to close out my thoughts on Camp Mystic for today is that 27 girls and young women died. They fatally drowned in the flooded river. The camp co-director, Dick Eastland, also died. But the degree to which it became apparent to me in reading the report that, quote, only 28 people died at Camp Mystic was pretty shocking. As I'd said to my friend, the fact that over 100 girls didn't die when they sheltered in the top of this balcony in an older building that had a weight load, and there was 100 people in this balcony, wooden balcony of an older building, and the floodwaters rose up to the bottom of the balcony. The fact that the balcony did not collapse is a miracle, a literal miracle, because if they had fallen in the water, if the balcony had collapsed, you would have lost another 100 people easily. And there were so many stories reported and synthesized in the report that was my one takeaway. If I can only share one takeaway, is that the fact that only, respectfully to the families and the victims, 28 is a lot, but the fact that it wasn't more when there was over 600 people on site is pretty shocking. The main reason I wanted to send out a newsletter this week before Canada Day was I did want to promote this video that has been in production for far too long, which is the Deaf Lifeguards video. This came about as the result of a Reddit post that was sent to me earlier in the year, and I was able to do recordings, interviews with some deaf lifeguards pretty early on thereafter. So I think this was sent to me in January of 2026. I did the interviews in February and March of 2026. And I had every intention of editing those interviews and then recording the intro and conclusion and the additional commentary right away. But the way work has been the last couple months with my husband's surgery and some staffing issues, it just was not possible. And one of the people I interviewed did follow up several times, and I hate to disappoint people. Like, I want to respect their time with the interview and their desire to share their story. And it was weighing very heavily on me for 2.5 months that I just could not get this video out there. The only thing I will say, not as an excuse, but just generally when it comes to video editing, when you're video editing one person versus a discussion, like a conversation, it does tend to take more time. So even editing myself, it can be 3 times the length of the video for editing. So if I record for 60 minutes, I anticipate at least 3 times that. So 1 hour turns into 3 hours of editing at a minimum, and then more when we're talking about something more complex. So, for example, the Typhoon Lagoon tour that I recently posted, that was easily 15 to 20 hours of editing. I started with 55 minutes of raw footage and edited it down to, I think, 18 minutes, not because I didn't like the rest of the footage, but because every single pan, every shot, every scroll, so to speak, and I didn't even color correct. I'm just muting audio, trimming the clips, fitting them together. And I do it chronologically. I don't even do it so much thematically because I'm already at capacity for the time that it takes. And so that's all of the tie-in. Is this ended up being about an hour and 15-minute video, which, as you can imagine, is 3 to 4 hours of editing. I'm really proud of how it ultimately resulted, and I would hope that you would consider watching it. I really had several people in mind that I was responding to, not in a critical way, but just in a way of showing that, yes, this is something that is possible. You can work in aquatics with hearing loss or hearing deficiency. It's not even just about whether it's a bona fide occupational requirement or whether it is illegal to exclude someone from the workforce for those reasons. There are many ways that the individuals I interviewed, so Lyric Gesso and Ashley Melanson, they share how it was very successful for them as guards and swim instructors. So I hope this can be a resource to you and your community or anybody that you know or in your organization to start this discussion. I am really touched when people think of me and share these topics with me. So, for example, somebody had asked me recently if I could talk about colostomy bags in the pool, which is something that I have seen as a recurring topic over the years, both in training lifeguards and coaching pool operators. And I'm happy to talk about that. Yes, you can 100% swim in the pool with your colostomy bag. It is sterile, it's sealed, it's not a hazard to other swimmers. I shouldn't have to make a video about it, but I'm happy to make a video to support access to education and awareness of what is right. Sometimes, though, I don't know that I'm the best person. Like, I'm not uniquely qualified to talk about colostomy bags. I don't have one. I'm not uniquely qualified to talk about deaf lifeguards. I'm not deaf. I am a lifeguard, and I don't want to interpose my opinions without the benefit of lived experience or expertise. That's why I try and interview people who can cover that. But on the flip side, I do recognize and I'm very grateful for the platform that I have, whereby people have said to me, I'm not comfortable doing that because my name is known in my area in the aquatics industry and people would recognize my name. I can't do that, or I would get in trouble, or I don't have the time. And I I don't have the time either sometimes, but we make it work. So please do consider watching or listening to the Deaf Lifeguard video. They have amazing stories to share. In terms of closed captions, we do add closed captions to all our videos. We actually use a human to type and edit and make sure the closed captions are accurate. This is something that really gets my goat from having watched closed captions for many, many years with my husband, who's hard of hearing, and seeing very poor quality closed captions. However, we do have to upload those files manually. We override the files that YouTube automatically generates with AI. And as of right now, when I'm recording this video on July 1st, the closed captions have not been updated or uploaded just because my staff member is still on off work for a little while. So I'm fully aware of the irony of not having the closed captions fixed yet, but I was not prepared to delay this video another 3 weeks on account of the closed captions, which have been earmarked as the first captioning priority when that person comes back to work. A few other things I shared in this newsletter that you may find beneficial. I found a very good definition of what is within arm's reach coming out of a Life Saving Society of Ontario safety standards document under the admission for aquatic facilities. Historically, swim instructors, lifeguards, we've always talked about within arm's reach. Don't go too far. What does that mean? There's a lot of different opinions with parents and guardians. What is within arm's reach? And so I really appreciated that this particular definition, which I don't think has received enough attention, honestly, direct supervision means within arm's reach and able to render immediate assistance. So you can see that directly above the bold sentence. That is the wording I think that we should be adopting in our day-to-day interactions with customers. Immediate assistance, able to render immediate assistance. I also shared some resources to breastfeeding in aquatic facilities coming out of Life Saving Society of Ontario. I've been doing a lot of research recently on Ontario health regulations, Ontario standards for a project that I'm on. I was fairly knowledgeable about these facilities and these documents, but I've been doing a deep dive with highlighting and annotation and citation. So I wanted to share this breastfeeding policy because it is a really good starting point for those facilities that have nothing in place. And waiting for there to be an incident where your lifeguards are not adequately trained about the right to breastfeed in and around the pool area is not something that you want to go viral for. You've got other problems you're going to have to deal with this summer. So the second part of the newsletter, if you've never seen one of these before, we always have a bunch of news. And I really didn't think I was going to have a bunch of news after just a few days, especially with the length of time and commitment for people to listen to last week's audio version of the newsletter. But there was definitely some unique stories this week that I wanted to share. And thank you. I don't know if you can see it, back to my colleague, Tim Auerhahn, whose wife got me these swimming glasses a few years ago. So a man in the UK admitted to defecating in a public pool 18 times. He ended up being charged criminally, and they did some research to figure out who did this. And the man apologized. The man took ownership of what he did. But I just want to know why. Like, was it an ex partner who worked at the pool? Did they have a grudge against the town council or mayor? Was there a new policy he didn't like? Was there a mental health issue? Like, I just want to know why. That's the main one for me. Why? And especially because this is an adult. We're not talking about a teenage boy who did this a couple of times, to replicate an Adam Sandler movie. Like, this is an adult. Why? Similarly, there was a $500 reward in Ashboro, one of the Carolinas, for sorry, I shouldn't laugh. Offers $500 for information on delinquent defecator. So that headline is definitely one of the best I've read this year. In all seriousness, though, I know there have been incidents when I was a pool manager where we were trying to figure out who pooped in the pool, not because we want to assign guilt, not because we want to make them pay for the pool closure, but because we simply want to educate and inform the parents, the teachers, the guardians, the swim club, the swim instructor, how to prevent it from happening again. Unfortunately, you often can't figure out who it was, especially in environments where there's no lifeguards. When I talk to my pool operators in hotels and condos, often the poop is simply reported when it's discovered later. It's not actually reported by the person who did it, which to begin with is very rare, but their parents either. So I think it's $500 is also a lot of money, so I don't know the impetus for that, but I think it is important to always educate the community if you can via signage or policies like, hey, if your child does poop in the pool, please let us know, not because we want to shame you or kick you out and make you pay for it, but because that lets us start the accidental fecal release, like the decontamination process sooner, faster, more efficiently when we know. And it prevents other people from potentially getting sick because they're swimming in water that we don't know has poop in it. I shared an incident this week where 10 people were injured by a lightning strike at a Swedish amusement park. I find these particular stories pertinent to aquatics because when I did my presentation on lifeguard injuries and fatalities on the job in North America, especially in the United States, I believe I found at least 3 incidents of lifeguard lightning strike deaths. So it was a common cause of injury and death. I wasn't able to get into much detail because of the nature of only having an hour to do the presentation and trying to balance it between indoor pools and outdoor pools. But it is definitely something that is on my radar as a topic worth exploring in more detail. Another story this week, a child was born, like a live birth occurred at a water park. Every time I used to add live childbirth incidents to my lifeguard scenarios in national lifeguard classes or recertifications, the candidates would have fun with it, but laugh and say, okay, that's never going to happen. And it's true that for most of us in urban areas where EMS or ambulances are 10 minutes away, transport to the hospital is very quick, it may not seem like a real life occurrence. And for most of us, it's never going to happen in our career, but it is something I think doesn't get talked about enough. And certainly, I know from colleagues who work in fire departments, live birth is a constant occurrence in terms of the call outs that they get. So that's why I wanted to share that. There was a drowning fatality in South Korea, and I share this because I found it interesting that the governance of the province where this occurred was then going to go ahead and inspect all of the theme parks and water parks in the area as a consequence of that. So I thought that was really interesting that all facilities were going to be inspected after that incident. I shared a memoir, a new book that's out from a lifeguard. It's really, I haven't read the book, but I shared the press blurb about the book. And I did share also a 25-year anniversary article regarding Andrea Yates. Trigger warning, this was a very famous case in the early 2000s. So this would have been 2001. Andrea Yates was a mom. I believe she was in Texas, and she was suffering from severe postpartum depression and mental health issues. And she was a stay at home mom, I believe, and she ended up murdering, fatally drowning intentionally all 5 of her children in the bathtub while her husband was at work. It was and remains a horrible tragedy for the children, for the family, as well as for the mom who's still been in jail ever since. The main reason I share this feature with one of the lawyers, which I found very interesting, was because the longer I read the news as a consultant every day, the more I have come to realize that killing your children in a bathtub is actually a lot more common than we talk about. So I don't have the statistics in front of me, but I would say in a given month of reading the news every day, there is one incidence of somebody alleged to have killed their child or children via drowning, waterfront, at the beach, bathtub. It's a really terrible situation, but unfortunately, it is believed to be, forgive my it sounds cavalier, but it's believed to be, quick or painless, or it's believed to be less messy or violent, and it typically seems to be people who snap due to a mental health issue, mental health crisis, depression, what have you. But I'm not even joking when I say once a month, somewhere in the US, Canada, around the world, somebody is alleged to have killed their children this way. So I think Andrea Yates's case is bears mentioning because it was the first big public case that I remember as a child, and it got a lot of awareness, and it was horrific and terrible for the family. But it still happens today, unfortunately, and I don't share a lot of those articles in our newsletter because they're criminal in nature, and I don't know that the news story or the news report reflects all of the details that are case specific. But I just want to let you know that just because I don't report them doesn't mean they don't happen a lot. Further, I attended a webinar last year. It was with a nurse who works in hospital administration and doing data collection. And she had shared as well in her presentation that drowning is, according to her expertise, presented in hospital more often than it actually occurs. So let's say you beat your child to death, or something else happened, and then you submerged their body so that they were wet or there was water in their lungs. She stated that the emergency room does receive a lot of alleged drownings that determined later not to be drownings. So I know one, for example, that comes to mind for me. This happened recently, I believe in Florida, at a vacation rental property with a doctor from Oklahoma. She was there and she alleged that her daughter drowned in the swimming pool overnight, that she, was unwitnessed drowning. But then the autopsy led to the mom being charged for murder, and she hasn't gone to trial yet because the autopsy stated that there was injuries, uh, uh, pre-mortem, like before she died, that were not consistent with drowning, and that there wasn't enough water in the lungs or the right water in the lungs. So it can be discovered, but it has to be looked for, if that makes sense. I shared an article from some Canadian researchers at Trent University in Peterborough, Ontario, regarding the algae in the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool. I shared a developing story out of British Columbia regarding 6 people who are presumed drowned fatally from a charter boat incident. Charter boats could be a whole other topic for discussion. As long as I've been reading news the last, 8, 9, 10 years, charter boats can sometimes be unregulated as smaller craft or vessels in different jurisdictions. They may not have the same transport requirements or licensing requirements or even captain master requirements as larger vessels, whether it's based on the tonnage or the length or the capacity or the intended usage. And so this is something I've been watching for a while, is just noticing the number of incidents that typically occur with a charter vessel as opposed to, let's say, a standard transportation vessel like a ferry or um, other marine vessels, if that makes sense. I shared a policy paper from the UK from a Labour Party consultant regarding rebuilding outdoor swimming pools, what they call Lidos in the UK. I shared an article out of India regarding drought impacting operations at a water park, and we are definitely starting to see that occur piecemeal throughout the United States and Canada. Not hugely, but it is starting to happen in certain regions, and it has been discussed a lot, even if it hasn't created a policy change yet. There was a German Schwimmbad that has been criticized for banning non-German speakers because they allegedly don't read the signs or follow instructions, which, like I said in the newsletter, there's a bridge between uh, thinking of a good idea and then enforcing a bad idea, right? Just because you think it doesn't mean you should do it. Um, I shared a video. This is a really good press article from Temple University. Journalist went out and asked very, very fit athletes at Temple University. One was, I believe, a football player, one was a dancer, very in shape individuals who know how to swim. She had them swimming in a pool, like a basin with walls, rebounding, pushing off. Then she took them to the ocean, had them swimming in the surf, and interviewed them to discuss how much harder it is, how much different. We need more of that type of education, unfortunately, because people, families, everyone of all ages continues to think that training in a swimming pool is sufficient to be safe in the ocean, and it's not. I'm a confident pool swimmer, but I'm a very not nervous, but casual and careful ocean swimmer because I don't know the first thing about ocean riptides and currents. I shared an article also this week regarding the Surfside condo collapse in Florida and how the new building that has been built on the site by the developer who purchased the land after it had been cleared, they've had difficulty selling those units, unsurprisingly. There's a lot of people who died on that site. The final report just came out a couple weeks ago saying conclusively what had happened. But understandably, the developer, right with oceanfront property, is having a hard time selling those units. Little boy drowned recently in a septic tank during his grandfather's repair work on the septic tank. Allegedly, he left the cover up for just a few moments and the child got in. And as you can imagine, with a septic tank, there is no ladder, there is no climbing out, even if you were an adult or a good swimmer. There was an interesting article, I don't know the background, regarding a policy in New York City that swimming pools cannot open until the police show up, NYPD. Don't have the background on that policy, the why it exists, the why it still exists, or why it's needed. If somebody knows, please pop a comment down below because I'm never here as an outsider to that jurisdiction. Like I live in Canada, I don't live in New York City. I'm not here to say that's a stupid rule because at some point that rule was important or helpful or trying to address a specific why. But it would be nice to know at this stage in 2026, is that vestigial? Should it be rescinded? Um, why is that policy in place? I don't know. Is it practical? I also shared a really good article alleging from CNN that construction firm who's previously done work on the Lincoln reflecting pool declined to do this project for President Trump because allegedly it was an unfeasible timeline and we don't have all the details, but it was unfeasible. And I shared in the newsletter how I decline work all the time or I decline specific clients or specific deadlines. I'm not trying to be picky, but I'm trying to make sure that I'm in alignment with what the client or facility needs. I can't do everything for everyone, and I want to make sure I'm serving the people who are best aligned with what I can actually offer. But I remember early on, it was 2019. I was actually just looking at the photos from this property a little bit earlier today. Somebody asked me if I wanted to project manage and assist with a renovation for a large municipal facility. I'm not going to get more specific, but they wanted to resurface the pool decks. So I would make sure that the contractors showed up, that the work was on time, on budget, that it looked the way it was supposed to. And I thought it was an interesting project because it was going to be a very large floor resurfacing. However, what I realized really quickly, and the reason I declined the project, is because they were going to do it while the whole pool remained open. So I'm not talking about leaving water in the basin and doing the flooring around it, like while nobody comes to swim. I'm talking about they were going to literally put up hoarding or barriers and do like this section of pool deck Well, people access the pool from this side for a week. Then we're going to move the hoarding to this side of the pool and people can access the basin from this side. And this was going to be with, I want to say stone hard or something epoxy based that is very noxious, creates a lot of fumes, requires probably low humidity to cure properly, proper ventilation. And I just said it's completely unrealistic to do. And this was a large facility. So I understood that they didn't want to close, for 5 weeks. But I said, like, I don't want to be attached to a project that just sounds like a bad idea to begin with. The lifeguards are going to be standing around in these fumes. Swimmers are going to be exposed to these fumes, whether you're telling me it's quote safe or not with fans and exhaust and ventilation. Then the product is going to be applied in a rush. The timeline is unrealistic. They contacted me a few months before this project was going to start. Never mind, is the humidity going to impact the quality of the application or the quality of the workmanship? I believe they were also saying that the guys were going to have to work, the crews were going to work overnight. It was just completely unrealistic for a facility that didn't have a critical issue. And I said, honestly, you just should put this off until, 6 months from now, 12 months from now. The floor is not dangerous. It just needs to be refinished. That is a classic example where a client gets in their mind what they want very specifically. They are the client. They are entitled to set a specific requirement or timeline, but it's not always reasonable. If it's not reasonable, it can't be done. And so, I mean, it always can be done in the sense that somebody may be willing to pay for it, or somebody might be willing to try and do it, but the final results may not be adequate, if that makes sense. The last little bit in the newsletter, we are coming up already on our July certified pool operator class. We offer classes on Zoom every month. For some reason, people are still sometimes surprised to learn that Zoom remains an accredited way to deliver the certified pool operator class. The main reason I teach on Zoom is simply because the demand has not been there to teach in person. When we taught in person before the pandemic and up until 2024, our classes really, really dropped in terms of people's preference is to take the training from their workplace or from their home or from a place that is convenient to them. And we stopped doing in person training. And I'm happy to send people to other providers. It is literally the same product, whether I'm standing in front of you in person or teaching on Zoom. And I know I'm preaching to the choir. If you're listening to this video, if you've made it this far, you already probably are in alignment with the services that we offer and the type of teaching that I offer. But I just like to say this periodically because people, I would say like once a quarter, somebody will reach out and they're genuinely of the opinion that it can't be the same experience and they go with another provider, which is completely their right and they should do that. I'm not going to try and convince them otherwise. In the same vein, I innovated the 4 days times 4 hours certified pool operator class format here in Alberta at the beginning of the pandemic in 2020. The other competing organization here copied me. It's fine. Sincerest form of flattery, I guess. But a couple of times a year, I do 2 days times 8 hours on Zoom. I don't do this very often because it's not a good learning experience for the students. It's exhausting for me to teach. It's exhausting for you to sit and learn. But I do recognize people need what they need. So we do have it twice a year. This year, the times for this are going to be July 16 and 17, which is coming up here very soon in terms of registration deadline. And then we also have the same type of pool operator scheduling offered in October of this year based on my schedule and travel that I have planned. So if you're interested in taking that 2-day Zoom just to get it out of the way for a few years, that is coming up quick. Please register or send me a message and let me know that you're planning to register, what that looks like in terms of funding. Last but not least, we're still running through the back catalog of videos on our YouTube channel. So some of you may not know that we have a bunch of webinars from 2020, 2021. And so those are all linked in the YouTube channel, but some of them do need refreshing. New captions, new thumbnails, make sure all the links still work. And the focus for this week for me was on the Junior Lifeguard Club webinar. So, setting up a Junior Lifeguard Club, developing one, how it can work for staffing, how it can work for community growth. And this was based on Ashley Melanson, who I interviewed for the Deaf Lifeguards video. She used to be in JLC with Adrian, who is one of the speakers in this video. So, definitely a good listen if you've been thinking about doing JLC at your facility. That's it for this week. Thank you so much for watching, for listening, for consuming, following on social media. Please give this video a like or send it to a colleague who you think should also be subscribed to the YouTube channel or the newsletter. We do all of this for free. There's no support financially, no sponsorship, no SponCon, that sort of thing, because we have a passion for educating and awareness. But a simple like, a share, a comment really honestly does help with the algorithm. Thank you again, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.